Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our Talker Story classroom. Today, our big question is this: why do people in some countries in West Africa, like Nigeria, Ghana, Sierra Leone, and Cameroon, speak a type of English called Pidgin? And actually, what in the world is Pidgin English? Is it a bird? Is it a code? Well, get comfortable, open up your ears, and let's dive into the story of the origin of Pidgin English. To understand this story, I want you to first close your eyes for a second. Imagine you are standing on a beautiful sandy beach. The sun is hot, the palm trees are waving in the wind, and you are in West Africa hundreds of years ago. Now, in this version of the past, you live in a bustling village. You have your own language, maybe you speak Yoruba, or Igbo, or Twi. Your language is beautiful, rich, and full of history. Now, imagine looking out at the ocean. You see a giant wooden ship with big white sails coming toward the shore. These ships are coming from Europe. First, they come from Portugal, and later they come from Britain, France, and other places. These people getting off the boats look different, they dress different, and most importantly for our story today, they sound completely different. Here is the problem. The people on the boat want to trade. They want to buy gold, spices, ivory, and other goods from West Africa. The people in the West African villages also want to trade. They want the cloth or the metal tools the Europeans have. But imagine trying to make a deal when you speak English and the other person speaks, say, Hausa, and neither of you has a dictionary, a translation app, or a teacher. You point at a banana. Then the sailor looks confused, but all you hear is noise. It's a barrier, a giant invisible wall called the language barrier. So, what do? Do you just give up and go home? No, humans are problem solvers. When we need to communicate, we find a way. This is exactly how Pidgin was born. It didn't happen overnight. It started with simple gestures, pointing and nodding. But eventually, the traders needed words. They needed a bridge language. A bridge language is exactly what it sounds like. It connects two sides that are far apart. The people in West Africa were very smart. They realized that the English sailors weren't going to learn the complex local languages. So the locals started listening to the English words. But here is the secret recipe. And this is the most important part to understand. They took those English words, but they didn't use English grammar. You know how in school, you have to learn about past tense, future tense, adjectives and adverbs, and it can get really complicated. Well, the inventors of Pidgin stripped all of that away. They took the English vocabulary, the bricks, and they built a house using African grammar and African sentence structures, the blueprints. So, Pidgin English is essentially a mix. It's like a smoothie. If you put strawberries and bananas in a blender, you don't get a strawberry and you don't get a banana. You get something new that tastes like both. That is Pidgin. It has English words, but it has an African soul, rhythm, and structure. It was just for work. It was a tool, like a hammer or a saw, used to get the job done at the shipping ports. But history is never that simple, right? As time went on, things got more complicated. We have to talk about a darker chapter of history to understand how this language spread. We have to talk about the era of colonization and the slave trade. For a long time, the British Empire took control of many areas in West Africa. They set up governments, schools, and businesses. Because the British were in charge, English became the language of power. If you wanted a good job
or if you wanted to work in the government, you had to speak English. However, Standard English, the kind the Queen of England speaks, is hard to learn if you don't go to a specific school for years. So, the local people kept using and developing their pidgin. It became a way for the local people to talk to the British rulers, but something else happened that was even more amazing. Remember how I said West Africa has its own languages? Well, that's an understatement. Nigeria alone has over 500 different languages. 500. Imagine living in a town where your neighbor on the left speaks one language, your neighbor on the right speaks another, and the shopkeeper down the street speaks a third. How do you all talk to each other? You use the bridge. You use pidgin. So even though pidgin started as a way to talk to the white sailors, it evolved into a way for Africans to talk to other Africans who were from different tribes. It became a language of unity. It was the one thing everyone had in common.
Let's fast forward a bit to the time when these countries became independent nations, mostly in the 1950s and 1960s. The British rulers left. Wrong. By this time, pidgin had grown roots. It wasn't just a business tool anymore. It was a language people used to joke, to tell stories, to sing songs, and to argue in the market. It had become part of the culture. It was spicy, funny, and very expressive. This brings us to an important distinction I want to teach you. A pidgin is a backup language. It's nobody's first language. It's what you learn just to trade. But when people start speaking that pidgin at home, and then their children are born and learn that pidgin as their very first language, their mother tongue, it changes. In places like Sierra Leone, they speak a language called Creole. Creole is a fully developed language that grew out of English pidgin. In Nigeria and Ghana and Cameroon, the pidgin has become so strong that for many young people, it is almost their first language, even if they also speak their local tribal language. Let's take a closer look at what this language actually sounds like today. If you went to Nigeria today, you wouldn't hear people sounding like Shakespeare. You would hear a very energetic, fast-paced language. Let me give you some examples. 2 words. Chop chop. It means, how are you? What's up? It's short, it's cool, and it gets the point across. Or imagine you are surprised by something. Chop? In Standard English, to chop means to cut something, like chopping wood or chopping onions. But in West African Pidgin, chop means to eat. So if someone says, I want to chop, they aren't going to karate chop a block of wood. They are hungry. They want dinner. Isn't that fun? It takes English words and gives them a totally new personality. Now, why does this matter to us? Why are we spending 15 minutes talking about this? It matters because for a long time, people looked down on pidgin. Teachers in schools would tell students, don't speak that. That is broken English. That is bad English. It was seen as the language of uneducated people. But that view is changing. In fact, it has changed a lot. Today, pidgin is a language of pride. It is used in music. If you listen to Afrobeats, which is super popular all over the world right now, you are hearing pidgin English lyrics. It is used in movies.
Nigeria has a huge movie industry called Nollywood, and millions of people watch these movies where the characters speak pidgin. It has become a badge of identity. It mixes the global with the local. Let's dig a little deeper into the specific countries, because I don't want you to think all pidgin is exactly the same. Just like American English sounds different from Australian English, Nigerian pidgin sounds different from Ghanaian pidgin or Cameroonian pidgin. In Cameroon, the mixture is even more fascinating because Cameroon was colonized by both the French and the British. So Cameroonian pidgin, often called Camfranglais by the youth, mixes English, French, and local indigenous words all into one big linguistic stew. It is incredibly creative. It shows how smart the human brain is. We don't just follow rules, we make new ones to fit our lives. In Ghana, the pidgin is often used a lot by students in secondary schools and universities. It's seen as a cool way to talk among friends. It creates a bond. If you meet someone from your country in a foreign land and you switch into pidgin, it feels like a warm hug. It feels like home. Now, let's talk about the grammar a little bit more, just so you can see how logical it actually is. I mentioned earlier that English grammar can be a headache. It changes so much. Pidgin simplifies this using markers, little words that tell you when something happened. See how efficient that is? You just change the little helper word in front of it. It's a very logical system, very similar to how many African languages work structurally. This is why it was so easy for people to learn it quickly, even if they had never been to school. Why? The answer is really a story of survival and creativity. It started because people needed to trade. It survived because people needed to understand each other in a region with hundreds of languages. It thrived because it became a symbol of culture and togetherness. It is also important to remember that most people who speak pidgin also speak standard English perfectly well. They can switch codes. Code switching is when you change how you talk depending on who you are with. You do this too. You talk differently to your best friend on the playground than you do to the principal of your school, right? West Africans do the same.
They might speak formal standard English in a business meeting or a court of law, and then switch to pidgin when they go out for lunch with their colleagues to tell a funny story. It's a linguistic superpower. Being able to speak pidgin opens doors to friendship and trust that standard English sometimes cannot open. Let's imagine a scenario to see how this works in real life. Imagine a market in Lagos, Nigeria. It is loud, colorful, and crowded. You want to buy some fabric. The seller might be an elderly woman from a different tribe than you. If you walk up and speak very stiff, formal Queen's English, she might think you are being snobby or that you are a stranger. But if you smile and say, "Mama, how far now?" you are instantly speaking her language. Not her tribal language, but the language of the street, the language of the people. She relaxes, she smiles. You are connecting on a different level. That is the power of pidgin. There is another reason why pidgin is so popular: humor. It is a very funny language. There are proverbs and sayings in pidgin that just don't sound as good in standard English. It means that love is blind, or that everyone is valuable to someone. But saying monkey no fine, but a mama like him just has a better rhythm, doesn't it? It paints a funny picture. This is a very popular phrase in West Africa. It reminds people that if things are bad, they will get better. And if things are good, don't get arrogant because things can change. This philosophy is baked into the language. So, as we get ready to wrap up our journey today, I want you to think about language in a new way. We often think of English as one thing, contained in a dictionary, with strict rules that you get graded on. But the story of pidgin teaches us that language is like a river. It flows. It changes shape depending on the land it flows through. When English flowed into West Africa, it mixed with the local soil, the local history, and the local spirit, and it became something new. It is a reminder that even when history is difficult, and the history of colonization and trade was very difficult, people are resilient. They take what is given to them, even if it is a foreign language, and they make it their own. They remix it, they upgrade it. It is built. It was built by millions of people over hundreds of years to solve a problem, and today it is spoken by over 75 million people in Nigeria alone. That is a lot of people. It is one of the fastest growing languages in the world. So, the next time you hear someone speaking English that sounds a little different or uses grammar you aren't used to, don't think it's wrong. Think about the history. Think about the creativity. Maybe one day you will visit West Africa And I promise you, the smile you get back will be worth it. We have traveled a long way today, from the wooden ships of the 1500s to the busy streets of modern-day Lagos and Accra. We've learnt that necessity is the mother of invention. When people need to talk, they will invent a language to do it. I hope you enjoyed this trip into linguistics and history. Remember to keep your ears open to the different ways people speak. Every accent and every dialect tells a story of where people came from and how they survived. That's all for our lesson today on the origin of Pidgin English. Keep learning, stay curious, and as they say in Pidgin to say goodbye,